The shocking truth about how we are our own worst enemy. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. Have you ever noticed that the voice inside your head is often your harshest critic? Not your boss, not your parents, not the internet trolls, but you. You sabotage yourself before others even get the chance. You doubt your own abilities more than your worst enemy ever could. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We think we're being realistic, humble, or just cautious, but in truth we're waging a quiet, relentless war against ourselves. And that war is the reason so many of us never reach the life we're capable of living. We think the enemy is out there: competition, society, luck, other people's judgments. But the shocking truth is that the most dangerous enemy is already inside the walls. It's the internalized voice of fear, self-hatred, and insecurity. It's the belief that we're not good enough, not worthy, not capable. That voice doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you not to try, not to hope, not to dream too big, because you'll just fail anyway. And the worst part? We listen.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This isn't just pop psychology. Philosophers have been warning us about this for centuries. Kierkegaard called it despair, the sickness unto death, not the despair of losing something external, but the despair of not being willing to be yourself. Nietzsche talked about self-overcoming, the idea that the greatest struggle in life is not against others, but against the parts of yourself that want to stay small. Even the Stoics, who were obsessed with controlling the mind, knew that inner turmoil was the real battlefield. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But most of us never take that power, because we've been trained to believe that the enemy is out there, when it's actually in here. Let's get brutally honest. How many times have you talked yourself out of something you wanted before even trying? How many times have you said, "I'm not smart enough, I'm not attractive enough, I'm not talented enough"? Where did those beliefs come from? Were you born with them? Of course not. Somewhere along the way, through rejection, criticism, trauma, or repetition, you absorbed the message that you were lacking, and instead of challenging that message, you built your identity around it. You started living a life that was smaller than your potential just to feel safe, just to avoid pain. But here's the catch: safety doesn't lead to fulfillment. It leads to regret. And this is where it gets deeply philosophical, because self-hatred isn't just a feeling, it's a distortion of reality. When you hate yourself, you're not seeing clearly. You're stuck in a delusion that you are fundamentally flawed, when in fact, you are a dynamic, evolving being with infinite capacity for change. You are not a finished product, you are a process. And judging yourself as inadequate is like judging a sunrise for not being noon yet. It's missing the point entirely. And here's what makes self-hatred so insidious. It hides behind logic. It wears the mask of reason. It tells you it's just being honest, just protecting you, just keeping you grounded. But what it's really doing is keeping you small, keeping you afraid, keeping you from stepping into the raw, terrifying, beautiful chaos of growth. And until you recognize that voice for what it is, an outdated program, an echo of other people's fears, you will continue to be your own worst enemy. Now, think about this. If someone else talked to you the way you talk to yourself, would you tolerate it? Would you call that person a friend? Or would you walk away knowing that their words were toxic. So why do we allow ourselves to be poisoned by our own thoughts? Why do we whisper to ourselves things we'd never say to someone we love? Because we haven't been taught how to challenge the inner narrative. We've been taught to believe our thoughts as if they were facts, but thoughts are not facts. They are stories, and just like stories, they can be rewritten. They must be rewritten if we are to live lives of meaning, purpose, and joy. So here's the beginning of the transformation. Realize that the enemy is not out there, it's the belief that you're not enough. And that belief isn't true. It never was. That voice inside your head is not your voice, it's an inherited script, a defense mechanism, a ghost from the past. You don't have to obey it. You don't have to be loyal to it. You can choose a new voice, a new story, a new self. But first, you have to see it. See the enemy clearly. Not with fear, but with understanding. Because once you see it, you can disarm it. You can stop fighting yourself and start fighting for yourself. The silent saboteur, how the inner critic masquerades as wisdom and keeps us stuck. It's easy to spot an enemy when it's loud, aggressive, or obvious, but the most dangerous saboteur isn't the one that screams, it's the one that whispers. It's that subtle voice in your head that sounds a lot like reason, like wisdom, like caution, but underneath it, there's something darker, something paralyzing. That voice is the inner critic, and it's not just part of your mind, it's a distortion of it. It wears the face of logic, but it's driven by fear. It tells you it's protecting you, but really, it's limiting you. And the most shocking part is that we believe it. We trust it. We even thank it, not realizing that it's quietly pulling us away from everything we truly want. This voice doesn't shout, "You're worthless." It says, "You probably shouldn't try that just in case you fail." It doesn't scream, "You're unlovable." It gently suggests, "They're probably just being polite. Don't get too close." It doesn't declare, "You're doomed." It softly warns, "Maybe now's not the right time." The inner critic doesn't block the road. It simply lays down enough doubt that you turn back on your own. And that is how we stay stuck. Not because we're not capable, but because we are being guided by a voice that pretends to be rational while secretly feeding off our deepest insecurities. Where does this voice come from? Most of the time, it's not even originally ours. It's a patchwork of every criticism we've ever internalized. Parents, teachers, bullies, authority figures, even cultural narratives. Over time, those external judgments become internal beliefs. We stop seeing them as opinions and begin accepting them as facts. And then we build our lives around them. We make safe choices, avoid risks, play small, and call it maturity. But what if it's not maturity? What if it's fear pretending to be wisdom? Philosophers have warned us about this false wisdom for centuries. In Plato's allegory of the cave, the prisoners believe the shadows on the wall are reality because that's all they've ever known. The inner critic is like those shadows. It convinces us that the limited, distorted version of ourselves is all there is. But once you step outside that cave, once you see the voice for what it is, a survival mechanism, not a truth, you begin to reclaim your power. You begin to realize that caution isn't always wisdom, and fear isn't always truth. Here's the real tragedy. We let the inner critic define our identity. We say, "I'm just not a confident person," or I'm not creative, or I'm not a risk taker, as if those are facts written in stone. But they're not. They're stories we've repeated so often that they've hardened into belief, and belief, unchecked, becomes fate. But what if we challenged that fate? What if we asked, who would I be without this voice? What if the identity we've been clinging to is just a cage built by fear? Let's get brutally honest again. How many dreams have you talked yourself out of before the world even had a chance to weigh in? How many times have you told yourself no before anyone else said a word? The inner critic is efficient. Before we even face external rejection, we've already rejected ourselves. And that's how it wins. It doesn't destroy your life with one big blow. It kills your potential with 1,000 tiny doubts. But here's the twist. The critic only thrives in silence. It survives in the dark corners of your mind where its logic goes unquestioned. The moment you shine a light on it by asking, is this actually true, or whose voice is this really, its power begins to shrink. The stronger your awareness, the weaker that voice becomes. You stop obeying it. You stop mistaking it for truth. You realize that the wise voice telling you not to try is actually terrified of your growth, because growth means change, and change threatens the illusion of safety the critic has worked so hard to protect. So what do? We stop treating that voice like a guide and start treating it like what it really is, a leftover echo of fear. We stop asking it for permission. We start questioning it with compassion, but also with courage. Because the truth is, the inner critic doesn't disappear, but it can be dethroned. And once it is, something wild and incredible begins to awaken inside you. A different voice, a deeper one, the voice of intuition, of purpose, of possibility. That voice doesn't offer certainty, but it offers something better, freedom. And maybe that's what scares us most, not failure, not rejection, but the radical freedom of becoming who we truly are, once we stop being our own worst enemy. The mirror trap, why we struggle to love ourselves and how that keeps us from loving life. There is something haunting about a mirror. It doesn't lie, but it also doesn't tell the whole truth. It reflects what is visible, but not what is invisible. Your pain, your potential, your inner world. And yet, we use it to judge ourselves completely. We look into the glass, see a version of ourselves shaped by time, fear, and comparison, and we decide, often unconsciously, that we are not enough. Not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough, and that judgment becomes the lens through which we see everything else. The mirror becomes a trap, and because we can't love what we see, we begin to believe we can't love life either. It's easy to think self-hatred is just a personal issue, a side effect of low self-esteem or past trauma, but it runs deeper than that. When we can't accept ourselves, we quietly reject the world around us. We become suspicious of joy, resistant to success, skeptical of love. Why? Because if we don't believe we're worthy of good things, we can't truly receive them. We'll push them away, sabotage them, or interpret them as accident. And so we spend our lives chasing things we don't believe we deserve, and then wonder why they never satisfy us when we get them. Self-love isn't vanity. It's not ego. It's not about thinking you're better than anyone else. It's about aligning with the truth of your own existence, that you are already worthy, not because of your accomplishments or appearance, but because you are here, conscious, aware, alive. And yet, so many of us live in opposition to that truth. We build identities based on rejection rather than connection. We try to earn love by being useful, by performing, by pleasing, but never by simply being. And when life doesn't respond the way we want it to, we say, "See, I knew I wasn't enough." The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that hell is other people, but he was only half right. Hell is the version of ourselves we believe others see. It's the internalized judgment we carry from a lifetime of being compared, criticized, or ignored. It's the feeling that no matter what we do, we're still not measuring up, and that hell follows us everywhere, not because other people are cruel, but because we've become so accustomed to seeing ourselves through a distorted lens, we don't know what truth looks like anymore. Let me ask you something real. When was the last time you looked at yourself, not in the mirror, but in your own mind, and felt love? Not pride, not relief, but love. That quiet, unwavering acceptance that says, even with all my flaws, I am still worthy. If that moment feels rare or non-existent, you're not alone. Most of us are so busy trying to fix ourselves that we've forgotten how to be with ourselves. And without that love, life becomes a performance, something we have to constantly prove we're good enough to deserve. But here's the twist. When you begin to love yourself, not in a loud, boastful way, but in a grounded, compassionate way, you start to see the world differently. You stop competing, you stop comparing, you stop needing constant validation, and in that space, life begins to open up. You see beauty where you used to see flaws, you see opportunity where you used to see danger, you see connection where you used to see rejection. This is not easy. It requires a radical shift in perception. It means looking at the parts of yourself you've been avoiding and choosing not to reject them. It means forgiving yourself, not just for your mistakes, but for the years you've spent believing you weren't good enough. It means breaking the mirror, metaphorically speaking, and realizing that your reflection is not your reality. Your worth is not something you earn, it's something you remember. And when you remember that, when you truly begin to feel it, you become dangerous in the most beautiful way. Because a person who loves themselves cannot be controlled by fear. They are no longer their own worst enemy, they are their own source of strength. And from that strength, they begin to love life. Not as something to conquer, but as something to cherish. Becoming the ally. How to stop fighting yourself and start building the life that wants you back. Everything begins to change the moment you realize you don't have to keep living as your own adversary. You don't have to keep waking up every day and entering into silent warfare with your mind, your body, your past, your potential. There's a deeper truth waiting behind all the noise, and it's this. You were never meant to be your own enemy. You were meant to be your own ally. And when you finally make that shift from inner sabotage to inner support, the life you've been chasing starts to turn around and face you. It stops running. It starts inviting. But how do we become our own ally after years, maybe decades of internal conflict? It starts with a single decision: to stop treating yourself like a problem that needs to be fixed and start treating yourself like a person that deserves to grow. That's not a small shift. That's a seismic reorientation of your identity. Because when you stop seeing yourself as broken, You stop approaching life like it's a battlefield. You drop the armor. You stop preparing to be attacked by your own thoughts. And in that stillness, something new emerges. Not perfection, not certainty, but peace. Most of us think we need to earn this peace, that we need to achieve something first, heal everything first, prove our worth first. But that's the trap. That's the old voice again, dressed in a new disguise. The truth is, peace isn't the reward at the end of the journey, it's the foundation. It's the ground you stand on when you finally stop running from yourself. And from that ground you begin to build, not out of fear, not out of desperation, but out of a sense of alignment with who you really are. Think of the people you admire most, not because they're famous or successful, but because they radiate something real. Chances are, they've made peace with themselves. They're not perfect, they still struggle, but they've stopped pretending to be someone else. They've stopped trying to win a war within their own heads, and that's what makes them magnetic. They're not fighting life, they're flowing with it, and that flow only becomes possible when you stop being your own resistance. Here's the real breakthrough. The life you want is not against you. It's not withholding itself out of cruelty or randomness. It's simply waiting for you to get out of your own way, to stop blocking the path with your doubts, your guilt, your fear. The moment you stop fighting yourself, you start working with yourself. And that's when everything accelerates. Your goals, your healing, your relationships, they all begin to respond differently. Why? Because you've stopped acting like an imposter in your own life. You've started acting like the architect. But this isn't about delusion. It's not about pretending everything is fine or ignoring your pain. It's about meeting your pain with compassion instead of judgment. It's about recognizing that every part of you, even the parts you've hated, have been trying to protect you in their own dysfunctional way. When you become your ally, you don't silence those parts. You listen to them. You learn from them. You integrate them. And in doing so, you become whole. Let me ask you one final question. What would your life look like if you were on your own side? If that voice in your head encouraged you instead of criticizing you? If your first instinct was to support yourself instead of sabotage yourself? How different would your choices be? How different would your days feel? The truth is, the world changes when you do. When you stop being your own enemy and start becoming your own ally, life doesn't magically become easy, but it becomes possible. The impossible things start to feel slightly more within reach. The people who hurt you lose their grip, the dreams you buried start to breathe again, and in that space, something extraordinary happens. You stop chasing a version of life that was never yours and start creating the one that always was. So take a breath, drop the sword. You don't need to fight anymore, not with yourself, not with your past, not with your worth. You are not your enemy, you are your beginning, and your life, the real one, the one that wants you back, is waiting for you to remember that. Now go build it.